Good morning. I'm speaking from the Dal Lake in the valley. I've been here for the last 4 days. I have met a broad cross section of people ranging from ideologues, former ministers, security people, media people, and the common people, of course, I have spoken with. Now, what I want to give is my 3 observations born out of this 4 days of stay here, followed by I will explain why in my assessment 5th August 2019 is likely to turn out to be bad news for India and good news for the Kashmiris, and then I will talk of the way forward. So let me start with my observations. The first observation is everybody that I spoke with here, whether in small groups or singly, each one of them without provocation, without my asking, referred to the valley as a conflict zone. Each one of them without exception, which basically meant that when the government says that the normalcy has come in the valley in the last 2 years, it's a misleading word. And most of the people here, they stick to the old narrative. And the old narrative is that the infiltration will increase, that now that Taliban have come to power in Afghanistan, they will direct the terrorists now onto Kashmir. Then Lashkar and Jaish-e, who are close to the Haqqani network in Taliban, they will be sent here by Pakistan. I don't buy all this. For the simple reason, times have changed, things have changed. Pakistan today, in my assessment, the proxy war does not mean that Kashmir has been downgraded by the Pakistanis. That will be incorrect. The proxy war will continue, but right now their priority should be stabilizing Afghanistan and looking at connectivity. These are their 2 priorities. Now, insofar as the people here are concerned, the changes that I have noticed is that the unified headquarters, which was created in 1994, though the chief minister of the state used to head the headquarters, unified headquarters, which was basically all the security forces and the army, it was virtually being run by the Northern Army commander and the 2 corps commanders, 15 and 16, 2 sides of the Peer Panjal. So that is, I think, now over. Everything has been taken over. Now, the big boss here is obviously the Lieutenant Governor, Mr. Manoj Sinha. Now, he runs the whole show, so it will not be incorrect to say that the Indian Army is more or less working under the Home Ministry today. And all that we heard about the politeness of the Indian Army, Ji Janab, when talking to the common people, I think does not exist any longer. This is the impression I have got. Now, my second observation is, obviously, it was to happen this way. Once the government of India decided, they did this August 2019 and said, all right, Jammu and Kashmir is now an integral part of India. The administration also needed to have an India face. And that is precisely what has happened. Because after all, the governance is done of a state is done by the administration. Today here, except for 1 or 2, everybody in the administration, top to the bottom, everybody, they have come from outside. The IS officers, the IPS officer, everybody has come here, which basically means that the old order has been completely rubbished. Things like Hurriyat, things like, knowing your people here, it doesn't exist any longer. In such a dispensation, there are some politicians in the valley who are still wanting to become the chief minister of Jammu and Kashmir. I think again they are being misled, or they are living in a fantasy world, because when you have an administration coming from outside, it is very obvious that the political leadership in Delhi, the government, will also be looking for a chief minister of their choice, preferably from when they make this upgrade, the union territory into a state. The chief minister is likely to be from Jammu. My third observation is that people in the valley are extremely happy, without exception, unhappy with Pakistan. Everybody says that Pakistan could have done much more, but they have not done enough for us after August 2019. Surprisingly, a lot of hopes have been put on China. The common discourse here is because China now is an occupation, supposed occupation of Indian territory in Ladakh, and which the government or the Indian military has not been able to reclaim the territory. In fact, none of the Indian leaders is even willing now to use the C word. So these people, the Kashmiris, seem to be relying a lot on China doing something for them. But overall, there is all pervasive fear here, and overall there is a sense of betrayal and there is deep anger. Having said this, my assessment is that actually what has happened is that the status quo has been broken. I must emphasize this, that status quo has been broken because what was continuing from 1990 and until August of 2019 was a status quo where comfort levels had been built, where people had a comfort zone, everybody was operating. That has been suddenly shattered, demolished by the Modi government. In my sense, it is a transformational thing that has happened. Why it is transformational is, now let me explain this by saying why this becomes bad news for India and perhaps good news for the Kashmiris. In my sense, it is bad news. What happened on August 2019 for India is because India has done what it could do. India has created new maps. India has said that Ladakh is a union territory. It has said that Jammu and Kashmir is a union territory. So all the cards are on the table. There is nothing further that India can do. Basically now the ball is in the Chinese court. But there is, why India did all this is because there is a belief here. Obviously the military leadership has advised the Modi government that look, as far as Pakistan is concerned, that is a minor irritant, we can take them on. Proxy war can always be taken care of by so-called surgical strike and the Balakot air attacks. And on top of that, as far as China is concerned, we will be able to hold them. I mean, after all, the Indian army, something like 1 lakh additional troops have been inducted on the Chinese border, that we will be able to hold them here only. So this will be possible. This is the military solution which has been suggested. In other words, a two-front war is a possibility along with a half-front war inside the valley, which in my assessment I have always maintained is baloney. Now, the other issue was the strategic balance of China. For the strategic balance of China, what the Modi government has felt is that this is possible, which is joining the Quad, getting more deeper embedded into the Quad, which basically means that now India identifies itself very close to the US Indo-Pacific strategy, of which Quad is the operating system and the centrality is of ASEAN. This is, and it is felt that by doing so, because at the end of the day, India offers two natural advantages to the Quad and America, which will remain. The one advantage is of its geography. And the second advantage is that after all, it does have an army which is 13 lakh, which is 1.3 million, plus the Air Force, plus the Navy. It's a huge force, the Indian military. So it is felt that it can constrain the maritime Silk Road, which is part of the Belt BRI of China in the Indian Ocean region, that this can be done. This is the thinking. So militarily we can take it on, strategically we can balance China, and as far as J&K is concerned, by removal of 370, a big thing has been done that now it is integrated with the mainland, new maps have been created. This is the Indian narrative. Now, what is missing in the narrative is obviously the people here have not applied themselves. Are two big things. The first big thing is that by doing what the Modi government has done is, they have created what was, rather transformed what was a bilateral issue of Kashmir under the Shimla agreement between India and Pakistan. They have made it into a geopolitical pivot for the alignments, geopolitical alignments in Asia. Let me explain. Kashmir today is more important primarily because of August 2019 than Afghanistan. Why do I say that? Because in Afghanistan, the Chinese have two interests. None of them is a core interest. Their interests are, number one, there should be no export of terror under the Taliban regime from Afghanistan. And their second interest is that once the situation stabilizes in Afghanistan, they should be able to take the connectivity, the BRI there. These are their two interests. Insofar as Kashmir is concerned, Modi government, what it has done is, before this event of August 2019, Ladakh was not a core interest of the Chinese. Their core interest was limited to Tibet, insofar as India is concerned. But by making it to a union territory, when all this while the Chinese said that we do not have a border with Ladakh, by cartography, a border has been created artificially, which is not acceptable to the Chinese. And if we all recall, Xi Jinping has repeatedly been telling the Americans and everybody that, look, when there is an issue of sovereignty, when there is an issue of our territory, every inch of that territory will be reclaimed. We will not leave any territory which has been bequeathed to us by our forefathers. Well, then Ladakh falls in that category. Ladakh, we must assess today, India must assess Ladakh as an added core interest of the Chinese. And Kashmir has always been a traditional core interest of the Pakistanis. So what have we done? Now we have brought these two countries, which were strategic partners, into a tighter embrace. Because here, their core interests are today coinciding in terms of strategic terms, political terms, technology terms, geopolitical terms, and military terms. There will be close consultation, cooperation, and interoperability is all getting built here, and this Kashmir will determine, in my assessment, in the next few years, whether Asia stays unipolar or it does not stay unipolar. It will be determined by that. This is the centrality of Kashmir today, which has been created. Now I come to my second point. Second point, which was not realized in India by the government, is that China is not a rising power. China is a risen power. When I say risen power in terms of hard power, which has three elements, it has economy, it has technology, and it has military power. It is way, way ahead of India. There is no competition at all. It is an unbridgeable gap. There can only be cooperation because they are in competition in these three areas with the United States. That is where the major competition is. So basically, by not understanding that they are not our level, they are a major power, and this gap is unbridgeable, what have we done? Let's understand. In the Chinese thinking, they always have a primary strategic direction and a secondary strategic direction. Until Kashmir happened, and subsequently they did Ladakh, the Chinese. Their primary direction was always Taiwan. It was how to integrate Taiwan with the mainland. That was their main concern. And their secondary consideration was India. India only mattered insofar as that, all right, things are fine with India. We have stabilized, we have good relations. India refused to accept the BRI. And then what did the Chinese do? Of their 6 land corridors, the one corridor where India was there, the corridor with Myanmar, they removed India's name from there. So there was a stability which was there going on. Now, I will not be surprised. In fact, this is what the strategic writers are writing. People who are close to the government, they are writing, and they are writing for the last 1 year, that there is a possibility now of the Chinese realizing that perhaps the route to their primary strategic direction runs through the secondary strategic direction. Let me explain what this means. At the primary strategic direction, which is Taiwan, they are pitted against the US military. Two major powers pitted against one another never go to war. For the simple reason, neither of them can do the war control. So all that they will do, their machinations, everything they do, is what is called the grey zone operations, stays below the threshold of war. Whereas in the case of the second strategic direction, where they felt all this long there was a balance, now there is an imbalance. And I explained the reason for the imbalance. The two core interests are meeting there, of the Pakistani and the Chinese. Now here, there is a very big possibility between a medium power and a major power going to war, for the simple reason that the major power can exercise war control, whereas the medium power cannot do that. So that is where it goes, because after all, their major competition with the US is about technology. This is the place they can test the technology in the second strategic direction. But nobody thought like this. So this is where the route goes. In other words, we are looking at a possibility, perhaps in my assessment, 3 to 4 years, 3 years, 4 years maximum. Why do I say that? There are 3 reasons why I say that. Number one, the Chinese always see the big picture. They always see a small thing, however important for them, how it enmeshes in the big picture. And the big picture is, they would certainly want to see some stability in Afghanistan. That's one. Number two, they will see how this major power competition with America is going. And number three, which is more important, and which is where India is doing a fatal mistake, a blunder, that is how fast India is integrating with the Quad and the Indo-Pacific strategy. Because that is what constrains the PLA options in the Indian Ocean region. These are the 3 big factors which will determine what they will do. The ball is in their court. India can do nothing. India has played all its cards, and now they will determine what is to be done. In other words, the breaking of this status quo of 30 years may look like very bad news for the Kashmiris, but there is enormous hope here, and the picture for India does not look good. Somebody asked me, will there be war? I said, no, there should not be war. What is the reason for war? War will happen when it will eventually happen. So what is to be done? Okay, what is to be done is, instead of now India talking with Pakistan, something that I have been advocating for a long time, the situation has changed. Why it has changed is because now China is in the vanguard as far as Kashmir is concerned. And let me make it very clear, Pakistan is not a client state. Pakistan is a sovereign state, self-respecting state with its own geopolitics and its own risen power. That is what Pakistan is. Now, but because China is in the vanguard, the only step that Prime Minister Modi needs to do is reach out to China for the 3rd informal summit with Xi Jinping. The first summit was in 2018, second in 2019. So India should reach out. Instead of rushing into the Quad, where we'll be in trouble, we should reach out to Xi Jinping, because the confabulations between Xi Jinping and Modi can determine the course of war and of peace. Thank you so much.